What's going on, guys? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It? This is your host, as always, Elliot Barr, and joining me is probably the smoothest guy that drinks a lot of. What's the drink I drink up here in Chicago? Marlo? I don't know.
Merlot?
I don't know what it is.
Chicago wine country? Malort, man.
Time.
The exact opposite, Malort.
It's my good man, Jake Payne. How are you doing, man?
Good. How are you, dude?
I'm good, man. I can't complain, man. I'm excited to have you on in the episode real quick. Give me one quick second. I gotta close my door. Oh. I should have done that before the episode started, but I saw it was 7:06, and as my grandma would say, if you're late, don't bother showing up. So yeah, man, we got an exciting episode for the listeners out there. We're very excited to have you guys on with us. This is our first ever live episode of Can I Kick It? You know, the best show for Black history. Is this 365? So I'm gonna let you say his name because I know I'm probably gonna ruin it because I totally forgot how to pronounce his last name, and you are the Bundesliga expert. So I'll let you lead the way.
Edwin Kostedde.
Okay. And that's who we're talking about in today's episode, Edwin Kostedde. Man, first of all, before we drop into this, I just want to know, man, how are you Black and a Bundesliga fan? Because most Black people in America are like Premier League fans, and they're like, you know what? I'm just gonna hop onto this because it's easy to watch. How are you a Bundesliga fan, man, and why?
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family is German and Belizean. So my grandfather would come over all the time from Germany, so I had that exposure to just the country in general. And he's from Dortmund, so like we had that kind of, I had that exposure to like BVB or, man, why am I messing this up already? But like to Dortmund, and then like it really picked up when I lived there. So I lived in Europe and Germany for a little bit, and like got to see all of that in person, and it's just, I think it's just such a really cool league. Like fan culture is so important there. It's like almost number one. It's just like, and like the team I like, FC Köln, is super likable even though they're terrible. So I mean, I think it's just like, yeah, it's not the Premier League, it's not the most flashy, but I think just like it's just a chill league, honestly.
Okay, I feel you. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Like, ever since I met you, I've always been interested in Bundesliga, but ever since I met you, I've been more interested in it. I made the wrong decision of kind of liking Schalke just because they had a bunch of Americans, and this is just advice out there to anyone like that. If you ever like a team that has a bunch of Americans in Europe, it's not going to end well for you. Not going to end well.
Well, I mean, you had a good excuse though, because one of the players was from Richmond, right?
Yeah,
I think he's on the youth team now. Yeah. But I mean, that's still a good reason, right?
Yeah, it kind of worked.
Just turned out terrible.
Once again, guys, we are doing our first ever live episode of Can I Kick It? So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Can I Kick It, pretty much this is a Black history podcast. We're going to be taking you through a journey to Edwin's career. We're going to make some little detours here and there with some interesting questions. So if you got a question, make sure you put it in the chat, and we'll make sure to answer those questions at the end of the episode. So, but starting off with Mr. Edwin, he got the nickname the German Black Pearl, and already I kind of feel like that's a messed up nickname in the sense of like they were kind of looking at him as like Black Jesus, and I'm like, this is not going to end well. Like when I saw that nickname already, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, his story, and like obviously we're going to talk about it, but his story, like I think the circumstances surrounding it, how it ended up, and what its legacy is like extremely disappointing. I think this is, in terms of all the episodes you've done of like, this is the impact they had, like, and like there's a lot of positivity. This is probably the downer one.
Yeah, this is the downer. I'm not gonna lie, it starts off tragically. So for those who don't know, Edwin Kostedde, he was born to a German mother and an African American father. His dad did military service, but he wasn't really involved in his life. But he grew up one of three multi-gender children in his, I guess, neighborhood. And growing up, he was like already he thought his life was cursed because he was the only one of the three to make it to adulthood. I think I read that one of them died in a car accident, and the other one passed away in a swimming pool accident.
Yeah,
So already he's already like this ain't turning out so well for me.
Yeah.
So from that point on, he kind of starts playing football, and then he goes to his first club, where he's there. So let me back up real quick. He played for, I think I have it down. He played from 1965 to 1983 for 11 different clubs. He spent the most time at Kickers Offenbach. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Look at my German coming through. That's who he spent the most time at. But he was a legendary, like he was a goal scorer. I don't know if I could really equate him to anyone at this time, but he was like a goal scorer. Like the man scored, I think, over 200 goals in his career. He was actually the top scorer in the Belgian league and League One and League at the present time. I'm going to say League One, that's USL. There's no way he's playing in America at that time.
Yeah, and I think Offenbach, if I remember correctly, even named a fanzine after him after he played. Like, that's how big he was there. He scored like 80 goals in 129 games, so the dude was like good.
Yeah, that's how you know you're like a club legend. Like, there's very few players that come into a club that like stick around with that club throughout their history. Like he is, I'm assuming for them, he is like the club legend to have that name after him. So this is something else that I found kind of interesting. So he was kicked out of his first club because he was drinking a lot at Dusselburg. So he went to the Belgian league, Standard Liège, and then all of a sudden he was like, "Oh, it clicked! I can score the ball, score!" And he just went on a rampage of scoring goals in the Belgian league.
Yeah, I think it was maybe that's what we're about to talk about, but I think the change of scenery was something that he needed.
Yeah, most definitely. And honestly, I think his time in the Belgian league, I think, my bad. In his story, he talks about a lot about regrets and like how he feels like he was left alone. And before we got on the podcast, me and you were talking chapter. That's we started a little bit late, but he also mentioned how when he was at Standard Liège, the Belgian FA came up to him and was like, "Hey, we want you to represent Belgium. There's a lot of Africans on the team. You felt at home. You already play in the league. Like, come on home. Come on home." It was like how the USA recruited Musa. Like, it's like, "Hey, look, we got them. We got people that look like you. Come on home." And he was kind of just like, "Nah, I want to represent Germany." And the funniest thing that I read was the Belgian FA person, the representative, was just like, "Why would you want to represent Germany? They don't like black people." And that to me was hilarious. Anything on that, Jake?
Yeah, it's I think that part's super interesting, and I think like maybe that's something that we're going to talk about more in depth of like national identity, but it's interesting to hear that come from Belgium just because of the history of Belgium too, but there was that prevailing thing. Like he only started playing for a national team. He played like 3 caps or something like that, and it was like in the like mid 70s. And then after that, I don't think there was another black player until unified Germany in 2000. So like in a way they were right, but I think that's not because I think in the sense of like how Jackie Robinson opened up baseball for quote unquote opened up baseball for a lot of black people. I think this kind of opened up how not fun it is to be black on the national team.
Yeah.
Just because like he in the same stories I'm sure you read, there's a lot of things of like systemic stuff in the German Federation that he was like, this sucks. Like they forced him to kind of put a positive spin on being black in Germany. Like he was used as like this marketing tool almost for something that honestly like Germany's kind of hush about. So like if you look it up, Germany doesn't necessarily keep demographic stats like as a country. because the idea is to like, oh, well, everyone's German, right? So that's kind of the whole subscription of like, well, I don't see race. And when you do that, you kind of erase the experiences that someone who is black in Germany may be going through. So I think it's just kind of like a product of that. And there's more to the story I'm sure we'll get into, but like I think like in the same way that he was a pioneer for like black people seeing this was possible, he was also black people in Germany who probably saw like, wow, this guy gets treated like garbage. So
yeah, most definitely. And like one of the key points about it that I saw was like the amount of racism that he went through in Germany. Because I had to imagine like being born in the era of which Germany was in West Germany, right after World War II, things like that. He really talks about how at his time, I forget the name of the club, but he pretty much they beat their rivals Eintracht Frankfurt. He scores a hat trick. And normally, like in today's world, he is lauded as a hero. Like, you don't have to pay for your meal the next day. You don't have to do anything. At that time, he went to go get his car service, and they refused him service because it was just like, you're black. Like, we're not.
yeah,
Like, even though he was this hero, they were just like, no, we're not feeding you. We're not doing anything for you. So that's really like crazy to think about in this time where you hear about soccer in Europe and you hear about it how it's supposed to be this unifying thing, this community thing, and yet they're still turning their back on this member that had this outstanding performance in the derby.
and I think it's just because like something I was thinking about in like thinking about this episode is like he says in one of the interviews that he has with you might have seen DW Sports or DW. It's short for Deutsche Welle. They did a story with him last year. And he said like 80% of Germans I don't feel are racist, 20% definitely are. And it got me thinking of like, I agree. Like when I was living in Germany, like there are only a few cases where I was like, oh, I don't feel very safe here, right? I think it's like when you leave it up to like, when you don't talk and when you don't speak out against racism as like a white person, like when you're not trying to understand that not seeing color kind of erases experiences of people of color, you let the people who want to talk about race, who are the people who want to detract from race, have all the say. So like outward racism in Germany is kind of low. Like I do think they take care of that, but they don't understand the systemic parts of it are also just as bad. So when you talk about race in Germany, at least in my experience, they kind of like are like, "Oh, this is a weird conversation." Like the people who don't think it's weird conversation are the people that don't like black people. So they leave that conversation up to them to determine things that are like, what is the German experience and like how much visibility black Germans get. They're going to paint them negatively. So
Yeah.
I think that goes down even to DFB. Is like you had that the instance with like Ozil when he was going through his thing. There were a lot more Germans saying there is no racism in Germany than there were like, hey, Ozil's getting treated kind of bad here. So, or even like any racism circumstance with the national team or just clubs in Germany. Like you don't have as many people speaking out because either they're scared or they don't know what to say. Like that's worse than like a racist person getting the next turn to speak in line. So,
yeah, and I would say like being here in America, like we have that privilege of where we can speak out against it, and that's something that I've always thought about. Like, how is it in other countries when they're taking the knee, they're talking about racism, things like that? How is it in those other countries? Like, do they have that safe space? Do they have that ability to talk about the things that impacts them, players and fans alike?
I think they do. It's just, for example, like here, right? When we say like something's racist or something feels racist about a club, we get maybe not as much support as we'd like, but we do get support from people who aren't black of being like, yeah, you're right. Like this is kind of messed up. Like let's have this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Like I feel like in Germany that exists, but either they don't. I think either, at least in my experience, I think either they see America and they see the extreme outward racism and they're like, oh, it's not that bad here. Or they're just so uncomfortable talking about that they choose just not to say anything. So, ends up being just as bad, you know?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. So kind of going back to Edwin, I want to talk about this goal that he scored for Hertha Berlin, that won German goal of the year in 1974. By the way, if you haven't seen it, we're going to put a link down in the description, in the show notes. It's a wonderful goal. Like it's a good one. Like it's kind of one of those FIFA goals where you just like randomly press like a button combination and it just happens to go so you're like, all right, game's over. We're done for today. Like that's kind of what happened.
Bro, they were scoring bangers in Germany, like in that era for no reason. Like you could spend so much time in like 70 to 80s Bundesliga. Like it's not even bad defense. It's just like I don't know what was going on.
Yo, I kind of feel like I think you said it before. Like that's the thing about the Bundesliga. Like it's not like it's bad defense. It's just we pick and choose when to play defense, and it kind of works out. It's almost like they're like the Pac-10 of European football. Like,
yeah,
no
exactly.
We're just gonna score.
That's the perfect analogy.
So for those that are coming in, I see kind of our listeners went up once again. If you got any questions for myself or Jake, drop them down in the chat. We'll be doing a listener question show at the end of the show tonight. So back to your point about the German league manager, whose names escapes me right now, at the time that he got called up, and we're gonna go into his story of how he got called up, which is amazing. Pretty much, the German manager at the time told him, he was like, when you talk to the media, let them know that everything's good here. You're welcome. You're wanted. And he was like, that's a lie. Like, I can't go out here and do that. But we see this so many times in sports, especially when it comes to black people in sports, of how we're kind of looked at it as to be the barometer of how things are going in the locker room. Case in point with Crystal Dunn and her coming out and saying that, oh, everything's good here in the locker room. We're not taking a knee, things like that. It's kind of foreshadowing what Edwin had to do. And I'm not saying Crystal Dunn wasn't able to do, we're not in the locker room, we're not in her area, we don't want to speculate, but you can kind of just sense the frustration within those in the locker room of like, I'm standing up for this issue because I believe in it, but I have to dwarf what I believe in for the greater good.
Yeah. Oh, they without a doubt. I think it was. Yeah, I have it pulled up. I cheat a little bit. Helmut Schmidt. Yeah, I think he said in one of his articles that like he was like, "Yo, say there's no racism. Like black people are fine in Germany," which is like extremely weird for someone in that position to be put in. And like I guess like a few of the players were also like, "Hey, like chill out with all of this and this and this," and like considering where he was at in his career, like he didn't want to deal with all of that, so he just kind of like did whatever they said. So, it's just a shame to see that just kind of like this was someone who had a very promising career at the time and whatnot, and he like had a ton of talent, and things like this just kind of like sports. I think that we kind of miss is such a mental game. Like if you're not mentally in what you're doing, you're not going to play well. And like these kind of things draw away from that. I don't think people understand that. It's not just like, oh, just shut up and deal with it. Like this is something you can't change and it's constantly going to come up when you're on road games and whatnot, or like when you're in your own locker room. Like it just takes away from it. You can't perform as good as you can when you're under that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it puts you under like dire circumstances. And we talked about it, about how he viewed his time with Germany as something as if like, I can't really perform the best way I can because I have to deal with all this extra BS on me. Like we've seen extraordinary cases like Jackie Robinson or Jesse Owens, but not every person are them,
Right.
Some people just succumb to that pressure. And when you don't have anyone that looks like you, you're kind of in the space of, well, I can't normally act how I want to act, so let me subdue myself, which can affect you on the field. And then when you don't have anyone that doesn't look like you in your corner visibly speaking up for you, you're more to be more subdued and more like, well, I really can't show how I really want to feel or act because if I do, I'm going to get misjudged, misrepresented, And I don't want that because, I know a lot of black people say this. They kind of hate being the first because if you're the first, you're going to deal with the most BS.
Yeah. And like he had to go through that like to such an extreme extent. Like he goes to his locker room. His teammates are saying there's no racism. He's going to the federation, say there's no racism. He's playing on the club level and like going to like Rostock and places like that and being like monkey chanted and stuff like that. Like it doesn't go away. And like you said with Jackie Robinson and stuff, that shouldn't be the expectation. Like the expectation should be not to be racist. Like,
yeah,
like them being strong is like that's not everyone, and they shouldn't be looked down for like, oh, you're not strong dealing with racism. Like, no, people should be working around having the crowds not be racist, not the person taking racism in a better way.
Yeah, 100%. Like it shouldn't be the thing of. As a black person, I should not have to subdue how I feel in order to make everyone else comfortable when I'm not the one making you uncomfortable.
Right. You're literally just existing.
Your actions are doing it. Yeah, exactly. Like I just happen to be breathing. Hope I don't piss anybody off. You know. So matter of fact, like we were talking about his time for Germany. So I'm gonna go into the story about how he got called into the German national team. So I think at this time he was playing for Kickers. Random enough, Richmond Kickers, boom, boom, but they're a different color. They happened to play against the European champions Bayern Munich, and most people thought like they were going to get dusted. And actually reversed other way around. They beat Bayern 6-0, and he personally twice destroyed Franz Beckenbauer. For those who don't know, Franz Beckenbauer in Germany is like Michael Jordan almost. Like he is that person.
Yeah.
And after that game, Beckenbauer and Durrell pretty much advocated him to be in the squad because Gerd Muller retired right after that previous World Cup for international duty, and they were like, "Yeah, he can be the next Gerd Muller. Like, homeboy, good. If you score a hat trick against Bayern Munich, I think that guarantees you like a lifetime deal." And in this present day and age, if you score against Bayern Munich, I'm pretty sure they're signing you just so you don't do it ever again.
Yeah, and Gerd Muller actually is also like very similar to Franz Beckenbauer. Like those two being on the same team is insane. But he actually is. It might be familiar to listeners because he has the record for the most goals in the Bundesliga. He had 1 and 2 right now, but like Lewandowski's getting close to. But like it was one of those records. I think it's like 41, like that no one thought would ever be broken. So he's also super incredible. So the fact that they thought he would replace him, like. That is a massive, massive honor at the time.
Yeah, most definitely. Like that is a huge, huge thing. And that's crazy to think about because he really mentions how Beckenbauer was the one that was that advocate. He was that quote unquote white ally for him in the locker room. And he was like, if it wasn't for Beckenbauer, I would not have made it to Wembley to play. Like I was done. And that's insane to think about, Because, like we said before, he only had 3 call-ups for the national team against Malta, England, and Greece. And he failed to score in all those games, but he said it's because, like, one, I credit him for this, like, he took his own self-awareness. He was like, I blame myself because I didn't live up to the standards I have for myself. But it was also like, as a center forward, I can't go out here and score goals if I'm there getting past the ball. Like, it don't add up,
Yeah,
and that's the crazy thing.
Yeah, it's like you're saying. Like, I'm sure there was like some cases of like players not wanting to pass to him because he was black. Like, it's incredibly hard to prove, but like you're saying, like if you're not getting passes as a striker, what are you gonna do? So,
yeah, most definitely, and that's sad to hear, but it's also like it's very believable, very believable at the same time. So after he retired in '83. Right around 1990, and it's kind of sad because he kind of also faded from obscurity. But like you said, like that's how Germany is. Like once you're done playing, unless you coaching, it's kind of like, all right, you done. Like, we don't want to hear nothing else from you. But in 1990, he got accused of armed robbery, and it is blowing my mind that like they accused this 50-year-old man of armed robbery, and the police literally came out there and said, like, you can go look this up. They literally came out their mouth and said, we couldn't find 5 other black people in the area, so we just assumed it was him. And I'm like, what? Like you just assumed. Like this 50-year-old man, you just assumed. And that's crazy. Like he spent 6 months in jail. First of all, he was falsely accused and falsely convicted. Spent 6 months in jail. The only reason why he got out of jail early is because he had a serious mental breakdown. And then after that, they had the audacity to give him, I forgot what the money in Germany was at the time. It was a DM. What was it called?
A Deutschmark.
Deutschmark. They gave him 3,000 Deutschmarks, which is the equivalent of 1,500 euros. And he was just like, yo, even if they gave me 10 million Deutschmarks, it wouldn't have equal to what I went through. Like, ever since that moment, my life has been in a downward spiral. You know, and that's crazy to think. Like, the police literally came out of their mouth and said, we couldn't find 5 other black people, so we just put a crime on him.
Yeah.
And he even talks about in the interview about how the jury itself was even kind of racist, because it was like when he went up there to explain to them, like, I wasn't at this place. Like, there's no evidence to pin me here. It kind of just got dismissed and was like, well, you're the black guy. We're just going to pin it on you.
Yeah, it's like this story is like the beginning of feeling uncomfortable, like growing up being black in Germany, the uncomfortability of being black while playing, and then the uncomfortability of like you have to live to this like perfect standard when you're not playing anymore. Still, like you're still under spotlight in a way, because that completely killed his legacy for a lot of people, which is unfair, but like that's what people used it to as an excuse for. So yeah, it's just really, and like just seeing him in the interviews and like talk about it, he's just like so just like disheartened. It's like really sad to see.
Yeah, he looked like someone that just totally gave up. Like he just looks. If you had the opportunity, I highly encourage y'all to go look up at the interview. Like Jake said, it's on DW Sport. It's a great article, great interview, but it's really gonna make you sit there and be like, how many other like players of color that play for international teams have these films? You know, it's very intense. Man, yeah, man, his life is so sad, and it makes me sad because I'm like, yeah. But moving on, he also mentioned in the article about how black people, like he's shocked to see so many people of color now play for the German national, like Leroy Sané, like Serge Gnabry, all of them. He's like, I never would have expected it. You know, I never would have thought like they would have had black people on. But and this is the one reason why I brought you on, because you are the Bundesliga expert. You're from Germany. You know how the culture is. Here in America, you know, we're very quick to be like, no, I'm African American. No, I'm this. I'm a black player playing for the U.S. men's national team. Over in Germany, it's quite different. Like, it's not, I'm a black German. It's, I'm German. You know, how is that limit like that?
Yeah, so that goes with what I was saying earlier about like the demographic stats. Is like it's set up that way because they're like, oh, to get rid of discrimination, you have to get rid of categories, which makes no sense. Like that's not how it works. So you're right. It is hard to like see where the black community is doing in Germany or how big it is even, because they don't keep track of it at all. So it's hard to measure accomplishments. I mean, they still do measure it because it's very easy to see. Like, I think we were talking before a show about Gerald Asamoah, who was the first black player to play for the unified team, and that was in 2000. So, like, it's still very hard. And I think, like, with what you were talking about before about identifying as German, maybe why he's so shocked is like, if you have the option to play for Ghana, for Nigeria, or something like that, and skip all of this, like people are more than likely going to take it. But I think there is a value in someone who knows this is going to be experienced, like Boateng or someone like that, like being racially abused just because they're representing their country. Like there is still an importance in that you show it's still possible. You know what I mean? So identity is such a weird thing in Europe, and it's going to get harder with like how big immigration, like that big immigration wave that happened a few years ago. It's just going to get harder, and the people are going to have to be more uncomfortable with having conversations like that.
Yeah. For real quick, let's talk about that, like that immigration rate, because me and you were, we got on the topic about this. That's how we got on the topic of doing this episode. How is the immigration in Germany? Because it's not something that's really talked about. Obviously here in America, we deal a lot with dual internationals. The most prominent one will be Julian Green, how we kind of snatched them out from under Germany, and they're probably taking us forward now because he's off the radar down in the second Bundesliga. But like, how is the immigration status in Germany when it comes to people from Africa, from the diaspora, coming up into Germany?
So it's a weird dichotomy. Or maybe dichotomy is not the right word, but Germany, theoretically, as like a government, felt the need, and they actually got really grilled for this. Like in Europe, they felt the need to take in a lot of immigrants, like from Syria and places like that. They're like, we want people to, like, if they have the better life, to like move in here and have a better life. Become German, whatever. So like, there's that part of it. But then there's also, because like people have this idea of what is German, people like the political party AfD, you probably saw, Alternative for Deutschland. They take it to a new level. They feel that the Germanness that they've been trying to push by not having categories is being threatened, because the category for Germany then became white. So basically anyone in the country who wasn't white, a certain portion of the population took that as Germany is under attack. So you have people that are very accepting of it, who understand, like you see a lot, I'm sure, in German soccer, people having like refugees welcome banners and stuff like that. There is that portion of Germany that's there, but there is a very, very strong portion of people who look at immigrants as threatening the idea of Germany, which is messed up, like extremely messed up. And a lot of it is actually from Turkish people. But Africans are like I should have pulled up the stat, but there's a lot of sub-Saharan Africans that are going to Germany right now too. So like in 10, 15 years, like Germany is just going to look more diverse. I think it already is. It is very diverse if you look past like the Lederhosen or whatever image people put on Germany, but it's just going to get more diverse, and that conversation is just going to be needed to have more and more often.
And do you think that conversation become easier to have with more diversity? I mean, obviously, all across Europe and the world, there's very few people of color in positions of change. Very few black coaches in Germany, I'm assuming, very few people that are president. Will we be able to have those conversations in Germany where effect can be changed, or would it kind of be the thing that you talked about earlier of, we're just going to sweep it up under the rug and we'll deal with it when the rug just can't handle it anymore?
I think it will. I have faith it will be easier, but people need, and this even goes for America, people need to be uncomfortable. Like you have to not get extremely defensive when a black player says, I don't feel comfortable because one of the players says racism's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are scared to offend racist people by like confronting them. And like Germany just needs to have that conversation of like, okay, most of us are like very tolerant of this stuff. Like we see the importance of it. So if we see someone in like an AfD, like representing AfD saying like Germans, like Africans live in huts and stuff, you can't just let them say that. You know what I mean? You need to like kind of stand up and be like, this is wrong. So I think Germany and a lot of countries in Europe are going to have to like think about that, of like, you can't just have a bunch of people of color move into your country and you just kind of watch them do it. Like, if you're someone who understands the importance of that happening for the country and understand the importance to the people moving in of like how they're trying to like fit into society and how hard that is, you can't stay silent when they're getting abused or like if they need support. Like, being not saying anything isn't a form of not being racist, I think. And I think people
No,
view it like that.
yeah, you're 100% right on that. Like a lot of people in clubs and supporter groups, domestic and abroad, believe that, well, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to speak up on it. Or
Right.
I don't want to put my view out there to dilute the views of others, which we always come back and tell people, like, no, your view is important. You just have to understand your lane. You have to understand that, yes, it doesn't directly affect you, but it affects me. It affects me because of the fact of I'm in this group with you. I'm in this circle with you, you know? And all Black people kind of go there where we have to go to that level of, okay, how many other people in this area are like me? And how many people in this area that are not like me will understand me and be comfortable around me? It's not like we have to, it's almost like we have to second guess ourselves almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you see it, like, honestly, bro, like, we talk about this a lot, obviously, but, like, I think people see, like, Black people uncomfortable, like, oh, there's no Black people there. We're not just, like, pointing that out. We're, like, it's a genuine uncomfortability. Like, if something pops off or something like that, or, like, if there is a racist person in the stands, or you just want people who look like you, like, I think that's just a normal human thing. Like, it shouldn't be shut down, and, like I said, like, you not saying anything because you don't want to say anything wrong, or like I think people treat racism as like a legitimate stance. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, I don't like that album, or like I don't like McDonald's. Like they treat it like that. Of like, okay, it's just their opinion. No, it's like hate speech. So people need to be stronger in like stepping up and saying something wrong. It can't just be Black people saying that all the time.
Yeah, and we talked about it before about how just saying I'm not racist or I'm against all forms of racism is not enough. It's a bare minimum statement. One, yes, it's about your actions, which you show publicly and privately, but it's also about making sure that you put things in place to stagnate racism. Are you going to get rid of racism in one fell swoop? No. Like, if we're being real, no. But over the course of time, if you put the policies and things in place and tools in place for people to learn about what they say, what they do, how is micro and macro aggressions of racism, then yes, they will learn how to combat it. And that's something like Edwin was talking about how there was no kind of conversation about that, how no one was talking about racism in Germany, or like, he's the Black guy. I think he quoted it famously, and is about to get explicit real quick. So if you got kids around, like, unmute the podcast. How there was a chant, I think it was at a German national team game. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. I think it might have been Greece, I believe, when they played Greece. About how they were singing 10 gays, 1 nigger. And it's just like, that's mind blowing, I mean, granted, now today, if we heard that, we would just think of Slavia Prague and just be like, well, hey, kick them out of Europa. But back in that time, there was no kind of stands against racism. Now they have it, but back in those days, there was nothing like it.
Yeah, and I think that actually goes, I think to make it go full circle a little bit, is like, while Franz Beckenbauer was a very strong ally to him, I think for his status, and Gerd Muller's at the time too, I think if they had flat out said publicly this was wrong, like this is dumb, like we need to do better, it would have done so much. But I think people just look at their image, like they don't want to offend racist people by being mad about this. And it's like you got to get over that. So I think that's the perfect thing. Like Beckenbauer had this platform, he had this fame, he was the dude in Germany, like you're saying. He could have definitely said like, Black people don't, like, Kostedde is not being treated well on this team. We have all this crazy stuff going on that's wrong. He could have easily said that, and he didn't. So
yeah. And I also think about it in terms of almost like we made the comparison earlier, how Franz Beckenbauer was kind of looked at as like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan famously had to rival with Isaiah Thomas, and he kind of ruled out Isaiah Thomas out of the dream team. But also, Michael Jordan also made it known like he's not going to get involved with politics. And I'm wondering now, was Franz Beckenbauer almost like that? Like, he recognized his image. So he recognized, if I take one side or the other, I'm going to ostracize the other side where I can get both and make money from both. You know, and I'm just wondering, was that dynamic playing out in his head, of the reason why he didn't come out and say anything publicly, because of the fact of he already advocated for him to be on the team. He got him to come back for the England, game. Why not come out and be more of an advocate? Or was it just the case in point during that time period, he's thinking in his head, well, I've done enough. I am an ally. I've advocated for you. What more can you expect from me to do?
Yeah, and I mean, of course, he can answer that, but like, I'm sure money has a lot to do with it, and like, people now are comfortable talking, like outwardly speaking out about that stuff. So, it would have been extremely brave for him to do, but that's what people need, is for non-racist white people to be brave, and just, if a racist doesn't want to wear a Franz Beckenbauer jersey, then oh well, you can't wear it to like the AfD meeting, So
yeah. And that's something else I want to ask you about, because we're seeing it now with it's not Curacao. Is it Curacao? It's not Curacao. Well, Curacao and Jamaica, how they're both kind of now latching on to the Netherlands and England respectively, and be like, hey, you're not going to play for them. And if you do play for them, you got people like Piers Morgan who are going to say every kind of negative thing about you in the world. Come here, play for your motherland, even if you're not from here. We can find some way to say you're from here so you can play here. Do you think that might happen with the German national team? I mean, with colonization and things like that, do you think players might just be like, all right, I wash my hands up, I'm going to go play for Turkey, or I'm going to go play for this other country?
Yeah, I mean, people have done it, and I think both sides are kind of blameless, Like, do you really want to deal with all of this crap with DFB and like people in these situations where you're playing a home game and you're getting booed? Like, do you really want to do that, or do you want to go to like a team that you feel comfortable in, and like, yeah, you're not going to go to the World Cup finals or anything like that, but you don't have to have this extra stress following you all the time? Like, there's a value in that, of course. Like, I don't blame anyone in that. But I think there are some people like Rudiger, like Boateng, and the people that are on the team that see what Kostedde did. We didn't talk about him today, but Jimmy Hartwig, he was also playing around the same time, and he was blackened in the Bundesliga. I think they do see those things, and they're like, okay, like, I know the struggle of growing up in Germany black. Like, I know what I could be for a black person in Germany. You know what I mean? So you're going to get both. I think is going to be more playing for a different country, but there still is value in people playing for the national team and being black.
Yeah, and also, like, listeners, if you're listening, if you got a question, definitely throw it in the chat. How can I ask this? Like, when it comes to being black in Germany, like, how is it day in, day out? I mean, we might have covered it, but like, how is it day in, day out?
All right, yeah, I'll go into that. So
it's like we just open up Pandora's box.
Because I don't get to talk about it that much, honestly. People don't ask me. But so I was over there when the Ferguson riots were happening. So like, it was weird having that go on, and then because that was all happening at night, and it would be like in the morning in Germany, you go to like university and nobody's saying anything, and you're like, what's going on? And like, you go on the bus, and they're like, sometimes like police officers, quote unquote, will be on the bus, and they're just like, hey. You're like, what? Like, it kind of feels like utopic in a way, like in regular life, of like, I'm really just walking around here, nobody's saying anything. Like, like, there's not a look, there's not anything. I'm just like moving through life. It's kind of like a little odd. And then it gets more odd when like there are racist things happening in the US, and you want to like talk to someone about it, but you're like, I was the only black person in my like circle of the university, so I didn't really get to talk to it. Like, when in the class for politics, we mainly stuck to Europe, so like there's that trade-off of not being able to talk about it that much. And the eternal struggle, as I'm sure every black person knows, finding a barber was impossible. That was impossible. I had to not cut my hair for like a month and 2 weeks. And like, there's a lot of Turkish people in like my neighborhood. This Turkish dude was like, dude, I can cut your hair. I promise. Just trust me. I can cut your hair. And he cut it flame, dude. He's the best barber I've had. But but like there's like these I think when you go from America where like blackness is such a core part of who you are to Germany where like it's not that big of a deal. It's nice because you can walk down the street at night and not feel like you're going to get like beaten up depending on where you are. But there are cases of like you do want to talk about it or you do want to find the black community. And there are cases of like when I went over there one time when the Euros were going on and I wore a Germany jersey, like in Leipzig, these dudes kind of were like, take that off, you're not German. Like there is still that, but I don't think it's to the same extent as it is here.
Yeah. So that brings us to this point of like, how do you think players such as Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry, like, how do you think they're dealing with it? Because case in point, if you look at like Belgium, where I'm not going to say they latched on to their blackness, but like they recognize like, hey, we got Lukaku. Like he has no problem throwing that fist up. Also, like with England, like how is that economy working as well? With you see like players such as Zaha Williams being outspoken, Raheem Sterling. Do you think is that available area for them to do that in Germany, or do you think it's kind of that thing of hush hush?
Well, I think they see what happened. Like, yes, there are teams like Belgium, England, France who latch on to their black players, but there's also the people that vehemently oppose that. So I think like there is that core in Germany for sure. I think it comes off that I'm like a Germany apologist. No, there is that core of people that absolutely hate black people.
Are you sure you're not a German apologist? I mean, you do have a Bundesliga show. You're wearing a German team.
I mean, I like in the same way you can like anything and recognize that it still kind of sucks. Like
Bundesliga, you got to recognize it,
right? I love the Bundesliga. It is far from perfect, but I think there is that available space. But I think they recognize that the bounce back from being outspoken, like not just existing, but like outspoken is bad because look like Özil yes, him being like with Erdogan and stuff like that is bad, but like it almost went to another level when like people were villainizing him, you know what I mean? Like when he was like, I don't want to play for a team anymore because I don't feel comfortable with like being Turkish, you know what I mean? Like you see stuff like that reaction and you're just kind of like, man, I just don't even want to deal with that. So I think that's the situation in Germany, honestly. It's like, will someone be outspoken? I hope so. But for right now, like, I think the possibility of what would, like, the nightmare scenarios of what would happen if you're an outspoken black player in the national team is just kind of like, I don't want to deal with it.
Okay. So let me ask you this. We've kind of been talking about it, dabbling. When it comes to the Bundesliga, do you feel like they have done enough when it comes to allowing players to speak out? Where in the Premier League, like granted, we know they could do a lot more than just the normal room for racism quotes they put out there. But do you think the Bundesliga has done enough, or if they haven't done enough, if you feel like they haven't, what can they do to do more to make it a safe space?
Well, I think recently. And again, I think it goes to the whole theme of what we're talking about. The outward racism, yes, they are. I will give Bundesliga clubs this: they are absolutely down with like defending their players and making them feel like they're part of the team. Because that happened with Jude Bellingham this last weekend, who plays for Dortmund. He was getting socially abused on Instagram, and like Dortmund made a whole thing about we stand with you. Like Köln, who played Dortmund, also made a thing about it too. They're very good with like making that atmosphere, but it can't just be that, right? You need, like you're saying, they need to be able to speak about this stuff too without feeling like something bad's going to happen. And I think it's just going to take someone who's part of the organization understanding that's an issue to tell a player it's not going to be an issue. We got you, which I think goes to the whole thing with what you said earlier. There's not a lot of black board members. There's not a lot of black presidents. Not a lot of black coaches. So, like, they don't even know that's a possibility. So I think to have that be a thing, you need to have more people of color, black people in your org, and they are lagging on that. So that's a big issue.
Yeah, most definitely, man. So we're gonna take a quick pause right here. If any listeners have a question, drop it in the chat. If not, then I think that's kind of pretty much it. Jake, man, I just want to say thank you once again. This is our first ever live episode. Once again, so I thank you, man. I know you're a master at it. With 50 Plus Derna. Can you just tell the listeners real quick, like what 50 Plus Derna is, why it's amazing, and why is it needed?
It's a weird show I do on Twitch where I go on Microsoft Paint and draw stuff.
That is literally the show. I promise you not. Like the first 20 minutes, I was like, why is there a cloud in the sun?
But it's just, I think, like one thing with Bundesliga coverage and stuff like that, there's not a lot of English resources, and the ones that are very factual. And I think like for me, I think something that will make the league more approachable is just having it covered just fun. You know what I mean? There's a lot of goofy Premier League shows. There's not a lot of goofy Bundesliga shows. So it's just a show talking about like the Bundesliga, the women's league too, and just having fun. Like just looking at really things like merch. Like, you know what I mean? Just like giving the league a personality, because extreme shade, the league doesn't know how to do it. So
I will say this, man, as someone that is tired of like a new Premier League show popping up on Twitter every 2 days, I appreciate a Bundesliga show that is totally different, man. I totally appreciate it. Listeners, this is Elliot. This is Jake Payne. If you are interested in Can I Kick It, you can reach out to us on Twitter at RiverCity93. Just a quick note of change. We are going underneath a name change. It's nothing dramatic. We're just changing our name a little bit just so we can be differentiated from the others of Can I Kick It podcast out there. So you'll be able to find this one exclusively in your podcast feed and on YouTube as well at RiverCity93. Also, be on the lookout for our website that is going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So that way, if you miss any past episodes, you can go back, read about the stories, check it out there. If you have any suggestions for upcoming episodes or people you would like for us to interview, you can do so by emailing us at 93rivercity@gmail.com or reaching us out on Twitter, which I probably will respond to because I do nothing else but be on my phone and play with my dog. So, man, Jake, before we roll out, anything you want to say to the listeners, my guy?
Nah, dude, you're killing it, bro. You need to get applauded. You kill it in every fashion. The podcast, Richmond Kickers, man, you're doing it all. You need to get your lap of honor, bro.
Look, man, like I say, man, I am a simple man with simple goals. That's it, man. But with that being said, listeners, thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this live episode. And that being said, be easy and be good. And in the podcast.